Alright, so today we will be continuing from where we stopped yesterday. Excuse me. So we completed our Navbar 1 yesterday, and today we're just going to start working on our Navbar 2. But before I start the Navbar 2, I quickly want to talk about global CSS and local CSS. Now, what do I mean by global CSS? Now, global CSS classes are CSS classes that are available to all your files, all your GSX files in your project. Now, if you look at your main index.css, now this index.css is imported inside the main.gsx. Now, this main.gsx is a file that house sorry that house all your um, components or pages. For example, you can see that the app component is being rendered here, right? Now, and the app component is here. So what is inside the app component, which is in this case Navbar 1, is being rendered here. So this is like, excuse me, this is like your root file. If there's anything like that. It's a file that houses, you know, all your, or let me call it mother file. It's a file that wraps or houses all your components. So you notice that this index.css is imported here, index.css, right? So it means that this index.css will be available to whatever is here, right? And by implication, whatever component is inside this app, right, will respond to this CSS here. So that makes this CSS, right, this index of CSS a global CSS file, right? So it means that whatever class you have inside this place, inside this index of CSS, will be available to any component that is inside this app, and by application, any component in your project, right? So it means that if I have like a class, example class here, and I say maybe background color red or white. Now, it means that since I've imported the class here, right, that example class will be available here, right? I can just say div and say, and so I can simply call that class here and say example class, and it will work. Why? Because that example class, excuse me, is inside our global CSS file. So just know that anything you put here will be available to all your project globally. I believe that is as clear as possible. So if you head into your index or CSS file, you should see something like this, right? Something like this currently, except we've deleted it. So what we want to do is to delete everything that is there. We don't need it, and style our body, right? Since this file is global, so we're going to style our body inside our index or CSS. I'll say width is just going to be 100 view width, and height is going to be 100 VH. I'll say padding is going to be 0. Margin is also going to be excuse me, 0. Then here we can define our global font family. For this, somehow I like to use system UI. If I don't have, we're going to talk about fonts anyway, but I like to use system UI. So we can also define our line heights. Line height is the spaces between texts, like vertical space between text, how close they are. But don't worry, we'll talk about it later. So line height will just be 1.5. That's all. That's all. So our excuse me, excuse me, our body will be styled here, right? So in this file, we're also going to have our CSS for mobile responsiveness. It's going to be globally. Since mobile responsiveness, we want to have mobile responsiveness for all, our components. So for now, we'll leave this for now. So let's quickly work on our NavbarTwo. So where's the design again? Yeah, so this is the design for our NavbarTwo. So let's just start. So we'll have our logo on the left, our anchors at the center, and then the CTA buttons on the right side of the navbar. So head into your components. I've created my own folder already. So inside the folder, we'll do navbar2.css, sorry, dot .jsx. Then we'll also do style.css. So inside the navbar2, we'll say sfc and we'll call this navbar2. Don't forget that your function name or component name must always start with capital letter. Then we'll have a stateless, a nameless tag. Then we'll say nav class navbar2. Now, so let's quickly go over the design. How do we achieve this design? What is the design again? Now, so width, we're not going to give it width since by default display flex takes 100% of the screen width. Now, so we'll have nav. Then inside the nav, we'll have three contents, right? Three divs. That's what I mean. One div will house the navbar, sorry, the logo. The second div will house the links. Then the third div will house the CTA buttons. So we'll have navbar inside nav, right? Div, then another div, then another div. Inside the first div, we'll put our logo. Inside the second div, we'll put our anchors. Then inside the third one, we'll have the CTA button. So let's quickly do that. So inside this NavbarTwo, we'll have our first div. Let's call that logo container, and let's just put anything inside. Okay, let me make the text bold. Steeze, Steeze, right? Now, so the second div will be our links container, right? So inside this one, you have anchor, you have home, sorry, home, features, what else? Blog, what else? You have prices. Then the last content will be another div that will house our CTA. We call it CTA container. And then for this one, I'm just going to use button or sign in, then another one for sign up, right? Oh, okay, sign in, sign up. Yeah, I'm correct. Now, so we're done with this component. My two is wrong. TWO. So let's use this component in our app, right? So here, let's scope this out. So doing it again. I'm going to import it by saying navbar2. Is it down here? And if you check it in the browser, you should see just under navbar1. Can you see? You have navbar1 here and then navbar2 down here. Now that's because navbar1 is just above navbar2. So we're just going to comment out navbar1. So we'll be left with navbar2. So let's style our navbar2. Don't forget this logo will be here, these features will be here, and this sign up, sign in will be here. Now the way to do that is to change the display of the navbar to flex. Now once you change display to flex, all the content will be horizontally aligned. Let's quickly do it. So inside our CSS, Let me just split my screen into two. Here I have my CSS. So inside my CSS, I'll say dot nav bar 2, right? I'm just going to copy it from here so I don't make any mistakes. Navbar 2, and I'll say display flex. Now it's not going to work because we have not imported it up here. So let's import it. Import, right? Since the CSS is inside the same folder with the navbar2.gsx, I'm just going to do style.css. Now, so you should see everything horizontally aligned, right? So it's now horizontally aligned because we changed the display from block to flex. Now, the next thing we want to do is to give it some background color. So we'll see what we are doing. Just going to do background color red and the full width. Now, so let's quickly give it some padding to give it some space around. So we'll do padding will be 30 px, and you should have something like this. Now, so let's now give it spacing. We want this one to be here, we want this one to be at the center, and then we want this to be at this other side here. So the way to do that is to use the justify content. Now, in the number one, we say justify content center. Now, if we do justify content center, look at what will happen. Everything will be centered, right? But that's not what we want. We want this to be here, the home features to be at the center, then this sign up, sign in to be at this place. Now, the way to do that is to do justify content space between. Now, space between means it will give, it will put space between this Steeze and home, right? This Steeze and the link container. Then it will put another space between the link container and the CTA container. What I'm saying is this: there will be a space between this and this, right? And another space between this and this. So to give it equal spacing, right? Let's see it and let's see what we have. Space between, and then you have this. Can you see? No stress. No stress. So display flex, justify content, space between. Now your CSS has to your HTML has to be like this for it to work, right? You need to have three content. Now look at the class name, justify content, space between. Now, what are the content inside your navbar? You have logo container, right? You have link container, and then you have CTA container. So you have three contents. So when you say space between the content, it gives space between the content and space them equally, right? Now, what happens if I just have two contents? Now, let me comment the CTA button, CTA container. Look at what you have. You have Steeze, and then you have what's it called now? The link container. And this is exactly NavbarTwo design. Let me show you. This is NavbarTwo. Simple. Logo here, and then your link container here. What are we doing? Display flex, right? Justify content, space between. That's all. We're done. So let's return this container, sorry, and then we'll have our design back. So let's style each of the content inside the navbar. So we're going to start by styling the link container. So the link container is going to be styled inside the navbar, right? So we'll say display is flex. We'll say background color white so you can see it, right? So you see background color is white. So let's give it some gap. Let's gap the content between it, inside it. And so we're going to gap the content inside the link container by saying gap. Let's just use 50 px and say, let's see. All right, let's increase the gap a little bit. Let's say 60 pixels, and we'll remove the background color, and we should have something like this. So let's style the anchors that are inside the link container. So we'll just do A. I'll say text decoration none. To remove the underline, all right? So the underline is gone. We change the color to a faded dark as H222. Then increase the font size a little bit to about 1.1 realm. That's all. Let's just use one realm. Then that is all about that. So lastly, let's style our link container, our CTA container. So I'm just going to close this, I'm going to close this, and I'll say dot CTA container, and this one display to is going to be flex, and then we're going to gap the elements. Let's just use 60 pixels for these two, and you should have something like this, right? But it's too much. The 60 pixels is too much. So let's do a 10, right? And we are good to go. Oh, so say button, right? So we're styling the button inside the CTA container. First, we'll say background color. I'm just going to use a bluish kind of background color. Let's do light blue, something like this. I should have something like this. And then I'm going to remove the border. Say border on set. They have something like this. Let's remove the background color so we'll see what we're doing. Right, and let's give it some box shadow. 0px, 2px, 16px, RGBA 0000.1. Right. So let's increase the font size of the button. Font size, I'll say one realm, right? And then font family. Now, if you notice, the font family here, we don't need font family. Sorry, we don't need font family. Let's just change the color to white. Color white. Let's even look at our design to see how it looks like. Right, so this one is white, this one is blue. Don't worry, sort this out. But let's continue doing what we're doing. So it has a little bit of border radius. Let's just say 5 pixels. Let's see. All right. Now let's give it a little bit of padding. Padding. Let's just do 5 pixels, and you should have something like this. Okay, 5 pixels is too small. Let's do 10. All right. So 10. Now, if you notice something, right? This the content inside the nav, they are not vertically aligned, right? They are horizontally aligned, but they are not vertically aligned. Look at this, there's more spacing here than here. So let's see if we can solve it. Now there's one other property that is align items center. Now this align items is to align it vertically centered, right? So if we say align item top, and you say that it will go to the top, right? If you say align item bottom, so this align item is vertical alignment, right? If you say bottom, to come to the bottom, right? Or anyways, but if you say centered, you see that it is now aligned centered. You see that you have equal spacing here and equal spacing here, and they are all aligned horizontally centered, right? They are also aligned vertically centered. So that's the whole essence of aligned items. Excuse me, center. So I think we are done. So let's remove this background color from this place and change, excuse me, the color of this one to red. Now there are two ways to do it. The first way is to create a separate class for this, right? And say and say sign in, right? Sign in CTA, and then inside the, what's it called now? Inside the nav, since sign in CTA is inside CTA container, so inside the CTA container, we're just going to come here and say, right? So here's the logic. We're going to create CSS classes that will override this, right? So we'll say background color transparent, right? And we're going to important it, because this one is already blue. We don't need to important it, right? We don't need to. I see that it has gone. So we'll change the color to this exact same color. And that's it. Then let's increase the font width. Let's make it more bolder. So say font width, I'm just going to say 600, right? So we're done with our design. Let's increase the font width of this one too, because in our design it's a little bit thick. It's a little bit thick, right? So let's, where is it? Inside links and anchor, you see font width 600, and we're good to go. So we're done. We're done with this design. I mean, very simple, right? I mean, extremely simple. So the second way to do this is to I'm just going to comment this out. Is to say button inside the button, right? Button, button. I just pray this works. Then we're going to do first child, right? I will say basically we just copy what is inside this place here. Since it's the same styling. I doubt if this will work, but let us see. It did not work. Let me see. Let me remove this. It didn't work. Okay. Let me see if I scoop it out. Oh wow, it worked. It worked, right? It worked. It won't be inside the button, to be outside, right? So we're targeting the first child of the button here, right? The inside this container, the first child, the button first child. We're targeting it. So this is the first child, this is the second child, and then it should work. So I think this is better actually, instead of using creating another class. And right, so your assignment will be to do the third nav bar, right? And then in our next class, we're going to take it a step further. We're going to be looking at mobile responsiveness. We're going to be doing nav bars for mobile phone, right? As you can see, on mobile is nonsense. Like it's not responsive, right? So we're going to make our nav bar responsive. So that's what we'll be doing in the next video. Make the nav bar responsive for different screen width. So that's what we'll be doing next video. So I hope you learned one or two. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions. Bye.